So at the other side, just for I decided to, because I can. Say will, and I do. It's life, isn't it? You live, you learn. Sometimes you live by the sword and you die by the sword. It's life. God, I do have a boring place, don't we? Right, 15% on the battery, so therefore I'll be about half an hour on here. Doing it backwards this time. Twitch, then YouTube. Always YouTube and then Twitch. Hence it being backwards. This is where I come in and speak to people where I don't understand their own mind at times. And it confuses me to the extent of mainly everything, but how to actually put them into, I don't know. I don't know what box to put them into. Not a box like that. I've got situations with people in boxes. I sound like a psycho when I'm saying that. But I've said this for years. I it's got this from before. Right. Box number one would be somebody that has certain other problems and this and that. Right. And then number two would have emotional problems and the whole lot. Number three will have their issues and they're out there and all that. Number four will have totally confused in life and everything that is going on. That is really, really bad. And then number five, well, number five is trying to catch up with the rest of them and they're trying to learn. And then number six, well, you don't want to get to number six because that gets really confusing. Because then you have to go through from one to five. And there's a lot of misunderstanding there within one to five to understand who the hell you are in the first place. I'm in box number 7. So I just gave up. Literally gave up. I gave up. Box number 7. Yeah, I think it's a safe box for me to be in. I'll go with that one. And then my explanation of boxes in one night. Sure, who wouldn't? It's a fun subject. Before tilted. Oh, I'm not getting all political on here. I'm not allowed to. Although, like other people that be on here don't have to be moderators. That will not go near my channel. Alright. Looks like I'm being infiltrated here. I don't know what's going on. Hi, how are you? Wherever you are, anyway. Nope. Gone again. Brazil got 50% tariffs. Use of official sanctions. Brazilian judge trying. Bolsonaro? Who the hell is that? Trump doesn't really like the South Americans at all, does he? Maybe it's because he hasn't got the land down there to have a golf club. Does anybody think about that one? God, I get bored in here now. Let me investigate. sponsor for meantime. That experiment went down the fucking drain. Seems like the majority of people that come on to my channel like the music in the background, and not my very exciting voice, which is very, very boring. So, the stupid music in the background. I think there's another. Anyway, YouTube, you can look into that for me and get back to me. You can actually send out your there anyway. I know you're a bot, so I'll just say YouTube. Find my moderators that are on here and send me an email. No, I probably can't do it from there anyway, but I appreciate it very much if you could do. It saves me a lot of investigation. So you have my email anyway, and I will appreciate it. In the meantime, I'll have a good day tomorrow. Why does the Trump family have to speak when they're talking like that? They have to use their lips very much to express what the words they're saying, and they're actually speaking like that, and in a way, think about the other word. And any expression that they have, like cutting a ribbon, they go ooh. Does the Trump family now have control over their face when they talk? Look at me. I'm like a ventriloquist, where I don't have to speak. I don't use my lips as much. It must be a condition that they have. I'm not sure, but maybe. Ooh. See you on the other side. Said that a few days ago, actually. No, that's not true. I think I'm wasting my time now. I'll find out in the winter. The time comes. I'm not gonna have them there. For now, anyway. I'll do. going. Right, somebody coming in 5 minutes. Apparently. Wait, when they go to bed? Fed up. Really tired now. So I'm just going to come in here on exactly 27 minutes past. Or 27. Let's see how. Channel stood up. Three minutes. Two minutes. Now I'll do my investigation work. Find out what the fuck is going on here. I'm just going to deep dive. Harry found a rock that thought was a medal that flew off her Olympic arms while she's sitting down. She's a disability of not walking. So this chap, unparticularly known, was to go over and talk to her and possibly asked for the medal because she didn't offer it. So what he done it was the pass, wasn't it a medal itself? It was the pass that you get for one day. So she wanted that, and here's me protecting. Here's me looking after. Here's me trying to help. Here's me trying to find a way. Here's me trying to get a situation without the two of them. But I got home the next morning around 5:30 in the morning. 5:30 in the morning. I don't drink that long anymore. I'm too old. So shit. I heard the government going to Northern Ireland because it's the only tourism they have. Using your own dollar. Me welcome to me when I go up there in peace to understand and what the hell useless managers they have up there. Pure joke. They haven't got a pot to piss in. And she walks in the door, she's laughing and she's smiling and this and that. One of the lads asked me, how long is she in there for? She's only had to come in the door. That's me first one. But I could see her deteriorating, getting worse and worse and worse. And it was a hard out stage because we could have bring her to the defibrillator in James's hospital, but the other two lads brought her to James's hospital, and that's where the complications started. But if she wanted a defibrillator, which I thought she did, to the hospital, that's it. Went against me. Went against my mum as well.
Closed by beach walls.
So I say,
and many people taking to higher ground, whether it was hilly areas overlooking beach areas or people going on rooftops, but also some stuck in gridlocks in traffic jams trying to get to higher ground. Some people, one woman was saying to local media, I work near the sea and I got the alert, and my boss just said, just go home and be with your kids. A lot of people were also expressing surprise, even though this is a country, of course, that it's on the Pacific, ring of fire. We're used to getting these alerts, the tsunami alerts and the earthquake alerts. But I think it's the fact that this covered such a huge area, but it was also in the aftermath of a huge and shallow earthquake in Russia's Far East.
And where do people tend to head towards when they're evacuating? Like, are there shelters? Are there defined places to go?
In this case, the higher the better. And so we've seen, for example, we've seen people gather in their local areas. It depends on the local area, right? Because again, this is such a large part of the Pacific coast. So we've seen some people gather in their local observatory, for example. So it's a higher ground overlooking the beach area. Others have gone into a town hall building, gathered there, hopefully getting some air conditioned rooms. Others on rooftops, and many really have been in their cars. They got in their cars and they went as high as they could, because again, the main thing is to evacuate low-lying areas, evacuate the beach areas, because throughout the day we've had dozens of waves hit the Japanese Pacific coast, some as high as 1.3 meters. But with these warnings that have come, people were asked to remain vigilant. They were told that some of these waves could be as high as 3 meters, and so the authorities have really been hammering it in. Go as high as you can. Remain on high alert. I will say one point of concern. I feel, and this always happens when you get warnings in the Fukushima area specifically,
Mm.
because it's such a sensitive area, if you will, because it comes with the echoes of that triple disaster of 2011. So when you get a tsunami warning in the Fukushima area, that kind of triggers a heightened sense of concern. And we did hear from the operating company of the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. They were one of the first organizations to update the media, and they were saying that all workers were evacuated as
no
a matter of precaution,
objections.
but also that no abnormalities were reported. But I also think that it always remains an area of
Yes.
concern, because even after all of those years, you still have radioactive debris at the bottom of these plants. They're constantly being cooled by huge amounts of water that then gets stored near the plants. So, as a matter of practice, these areas are always kept as safe as possible, as isolated as possible.
And did the country as a whole learn any lessons from that 2011 quake and tsunami that means that they react better to it now?
Much faster, and the updates are much more regular. Again, this is a country that has one of the most sophisticated warning and alert systems, disaster alert systems in the world, really. And again, people get woken up, and they either get woken up by alerts on their phones, or actual sirens that sound in their areas, or sound on the phones, depending on how big the scale is of the disaster, whether it's the earthquake or tsunami. And as I was throughout the day, in the many hours I've been on air, throughout the day, the warnings and the alerts have just kept coming, and they would have been more intense for the people closer to the areas. So yes, I think after 2011, there have been so many measures put in place to kind of upgrade and make those alert systems more updated, more sophisticated, and also just uh, as fast as possible to people, to give them the most updated information so they can act on it.
And are people sort of alive to aftershocks?
I think that's the main concern now, is what happens after that big earthquake. The Russian authorities have said that there could be a risk of aftershocks, and aftershocks on in Russia's Far East means that there could be waves that could travel within the Pacific and within the Japan Pacific coast. I think the advisory now means that people can breathe a little bit easier, but that they should remain vigilant. That this is not a kind of a red warning, which is what we've had, but there is possibility of movement, because the situation is fluid on the Russian Pacific coast. So people, I think, will still be attached to their phones, will still be looking at updates about what the waves are doing, how far they're traveling, and how big they are hitting the coast.
Shaima, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Adam. Good to see you.
So that was Shaima's sitrep in Japan, which I recorded just before we recorded the rest of this episode of Newscast. I know Victoria's got a question for you, Rebecca, but just before I go to her, what do we know about how tsunamis actually work?
So, in order to have a tsunami, you need to have some kind of
Not
disruption
like that,
in the
everything on it.
seabed. So if the seabed
The
moves,
great
it
show that
moves the
myself
water column above it.
Agnes
And remember,
fault
the
that you
subduction
make.
zones where we're talking about,
Be very
many of them
reasonable.
can be under
Don't
many
worry.
kilometers of water.
Not a
Some
bad
of the,
man.
subduction zone trenches are the deepest
Right.
parts of the Earth's
IRS.
ocean. There's a lot of water here above these megathrust faults. So if you do have an earthquake which ruptures very shallow depths, some earthquakes may even rupture completely to the seabed. That means that the overriding plate and any relief, any seabed relief on it will also get moved. So the movement...
Relief as in like...
lumps and bumps.
Yeah. Mountains on
exactly.
the sea.
Bumps and bumps on the seabed. When those get moved, they disrupt the water column above it, and then that kind of collapse of water then creates our tsunami waves, which will propagate, in all directions, a bit like dropping a stone in a pond. It's not just a single wave, right? It's a kind of ripple effect, like dropping a rock in a pond.
And does a tsunami wave, when it hits land, look like it does in the films, or is it more kind of complicated than that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can actually see the sea regressing away from the shore. That's...
Oh yes, the tide goes out quite dramatically.
Yeah, so in the 2004 Sumatra Andaman earthquake, there were reports of people going out because fish were exposed, and that was one reason why so many people were killed in that event. So the sea can recede before the tsunami wave comes in. That doesn't always have to happen. It kind of depends on whether the seabed movements are related to a drop or an uplift in the seabed. So that's one sign. So it's worth knowing that that's a potential sign of an incoming tsunami if you ever experience that.
In that area, yeah. Victoria, what were you going to ask Rebecca?
I have so many questions,
Oh,
Rebecca.
good.
But we've had reports as well of a volcanic eruption in the far east of Russia. Is there a known link between earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, or these kind of tectonic events?
Oh, I'm not aware of that, Victoria. That's news to me.
Interesting. I wondered whether there was a direct link, or whether we can say that this activity in the Earth's crust is kind of tied together in any way.
Yeah, I mean, when these earthquakes happen, it does completely change the stress field of the surrounding region.
What does that mean?
So on these subduction megathrust faults, between earthquakes, the plates are moving at centimeters per year, as I mentioned before, so the speed your fingernails grow. And all of that time, the force of that movement kind of builds up between the two plates. And once enough force is built up to overcome the friction between these plates, remember, they're blocks of rock kilometers thick, they're really heavy, there's lots of friction between them. But when enough force is built up, then they can suddenly slip. But they don't slip everywhere along that megathrust, they just slip in a patch. Even today's earthquake was 390 kilometers by 150 kilometers, I think, so it's just one patch. That changes the stress field on the fault around it. So if you've got a part of the fault that was nearly ready to go in an earthquake, but not quite, today's earthquake might have enhanced the stress, the force on that fault, meaning it could slip more quickly than it would have otherwise. Alternatively, the fault can also reduce the stress in some places too. So it can mean if there was a fault close to failure, close to slipping, it may now not fail for another decade or so. So it completely kind of changes the stress field. And people model that after earthquakes to try and assess, which faults could be a danger. The Turkey-Syria earthquakes, we saw one earthquake, then we saw that trigger a subsequent earthquake. So that was an example of this kind of stress triggering. Whether or not, that happens over very large distances, people are a little bit more skeptical about over what distances that stress can be transferred, and whether or not it could also, cause variations in volcanic events. I'm not sure, but certainly in terms of triggering other earthquakes, or meaning earthquakes may now happen a bit later than they would have otherwise. Right. That's certainly true.
I feel like we're turning your newscast, Adam, into an episode of Inside Science, which is
sorry.
No, it's great.
Happy to spread the love to other people in the program.
No, I'm in my element. And is there a danger as well of the seismometers that are nearest the event getting destroyed by the event?
Oh, that's a good question. Possibly. In 2018, I did a big experiment in New Zealand where we put out 200 seismometers to understand the subduction zone in New Zealand. That subduction zone is kind of interesting because it hasn't had any large earthquakes recently. So we're kind of wondering, is that because the next one is due in hundreds of years, or is stress being relieved in a different way? So we know that some subduction zones don't do this thing where they lock up for hundreds of years. They lock up for a little bit, maybe a few years, and then slip slowly. And these are called slow slip events. So we're trying to understand how slow slip events relate to, large earthquakes like the one we've seen today. So in 2018, we put out 200 seismometers to understand slow slip events. We took them all away in October of 2018, and then in December 2018, there was a big mud volcano eruption, which would have completely covered a bunch of them.
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, we certainly do see things, equipment damaged.
And I should just say, Victoria, Reuters are now quoting the Russian Academy of Sciences United Geophysical Service, saying that there has been a volcanic eruption. And in their statement, they said a descent of burning hot lava is observed on the western slope, powerful glow above the volcano, explosions.
Wow.
So I'm not sure how populated that area is. I imagine not very.
There's quite a lot of active volcanoes in that region. I was just sort of looking at a map of volcanic activity in that area, and there are quite a lot of active volcanoes like all along, hundreds of miles along that sort of fault line. So, yeah, it's interesting, but it means that people in that area are still going to be on high alert. Although I think you're right, Adam. It's a very remote part of far eastern Russia. I don't think it is particularly densely populated.
And Victoria, I mean, it seems that around the world people are sort of standing down from where they were a couple of hours ago.
It seems like that, which is which is good news for the people who were in the path of this tsunami, and also shows that these warning systems are working well. Giving people a chance to get to higher ground and to get themselves safe. And I think it's something that we'll get a clearer picture of in the days and weeks of just, the more information that we can get from sensors in the ocean about how the water moved, about how that wave travelled, as well as seismometers about, how the Earth's crust was moving. We'll get a clearer picture of exactly what happened, how much movement, how quickly, how that wave dissipated, so that we can, build up a clear image of exactly what went on.
And talking about buildings, Rebecca, I mean, there's a vast gulf in the world between buildings that are built very well to withstand these very powerful forces in places like Japan, say, and places where they absolutely are not. For example, we saw in Turkey and Syria a couple of years ago.
Absolutely. And, a lot of that, I guess, has got to do with the economy and how much money that countries have. But also it depends on, whether a country's experienced a large earthquake of that size. So in Japan, reasonably frequently they have earthquakes of magnitude 8s, magnitude 9s. So there's a culture there that, investing in developing buildings is a really good thing to do. In some subduction zones, we haven't seen large earthquakes of that size. And, in those locations, we're not necessarily building buildings to withstand magnitude 8s or 9s. And that's something that, I'm really interested in researching, seeing if we can get to the bottom of what makes a subduction zone segment have a magnitude 9, and can we get closer to figuring out which subduction zones around the world that haven't seen magnitude 8.8s or 9s recently, but could be capable of it.
And does that mean we could have a sort of early warning system of the like we've got for tsunamis, because that happens sort of in slow motion, so you can have warnings? It would be great to have that for earthquakes, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. That's the much more difficult problem. So tsunami waves in the ocean, they're fast, but they travel about as fast as a jet plane. So you've got the time it takes you to fly from eastern Russia to Hawaii to, prepare for it. Earthquake rupture is much, much faster. And it's much more difficult to get an early warning for that.
Right, Victoria, thank you very much for your analysis today.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to join you, Adam. Thanks.
And Dr. Bell, thanks to you too.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thanks.
And that's all for this episode of Newscast. We will be back with another one very soon. Bye-bye.
Hello there. The weather story is a little bit more unsettled through the course of Thursday. It's going to be a case of scattered showers, some of them possibly heavy and thundery, moving their way through England and Wales. The wind direction changing as well, that little bit fresher. So northwesterly behind this weather front that's drifting some sharp showers across Wales, central and southern England. As I say, some of those could be quite heavy with the odd rumble of thunder into the afternoon. To the north of that, Fewer showers, some sunny spells coming through, but nevertheless still that little bit fresher with that brisk breeze. So we're looking at around 16 to 20 degrees in Scotland and Northern Ireland, highest values of 22 or 23 across southeast England. Some of those showers will fade away, linger along east coast as we go into the early hours of Friday morning, with clearer skies, a slightly fresher start to Friday, but the best of the sunshine on Friday is likely to be in sheltered western areas. We've still got that brisk northwesterly breeze. That'll drive in a few scattered showers into the northwest and running down to the east of the Pennines along that east coast. But on the whole, sunny spells, a few isolated showers, and again, that little bit fresher. Somewhat drier, sunnier conditions to start off the weekend. Saturday is looking quite promising before more wet and potentially windy weather arrives Sunday, Monday. Warming up, though, through the middle part of the following week. Take care.
Donald Trump's second term has brought sweeping changes both at home and on the international stage.
They charge us, we charge them.
Join our teams for the latest developments and reaction. See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts on the News app. And get in-depth coverage on bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
I think the first signs that I wanted to be a journalist were when, as a kid, I started making pretend reports in my back garden. I always liked asking a lot of questions. But as I grew up, I wanted to be part of trying to explain why things happen. I've had a lot of different jobs in journalism. What I've learned is that it's always about the people that are at the heart of these stories, how they're affected. The wildfires was a story I was living through myself. It is really hard to comprehend how life is ever going to get back to normal here. Overwhelming for so many people in the city, and it was affecting everyone's day-to-day lives. And I was going to bed at night not really knowing what I was going to wake up to the next day. The fires were burning right around us, so we were having to take split-second decisions about how to gather pictures and tell this story.
There's helicopters flying just above us, just dropping water now, trying to keep those flames at bay.
It was tearing through everything. I knew thousands of people were leaving their homes and were probably never going to get to go back to them. And in the middle of that chaos, I had to find ways to talk to people about what they were experiencing.
That was my house.
It's all gone.
I think hearing one person's story helps viewers trust what they're hearing. Because when you can empathise with one person's experience, it helps you get an understanding of the bigger picture.
The human toll of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, just some of the thousands of soldiers who've been killed. Now Ukraine is going to get some more of the weapons it's been asking for, and President Trump has given Russia a deadline to agree to a ceasefire. What difference will that make? Join me, Charlotte Gallagher, in Ukraine for BBC News.
The French are co-chairing a meeting here at the United Nations, trying to rekindle a future two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians. But the Trump administration is calling all of this a publicity stunt as the West splits over the war in Gaza. Join me, Tom Bateman, for our coverage here on BBC News.
Irvine Welsh is famous for Train Spotting, the novel he wrote here that tapped into the cultural zeitgeist and became a cult film. Now the Scottish author has written a sequel, picking up where Train Spotting left off and catching up with the exploits of the gang. Join me, Katie Razzle, on BBC iClaire.
Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada will recognize a Palestinian state in September if certain conditions are met. U.S. President Donald Trump announces a trade deal with South Korea, but hits India and Brazil with fresh tariffs as a deadline approaches for countries to reach new agreements. And the U.S. Federal Reserve keeps interest rates unchanged for a fifth straight time. That's despite pressure from President Trump. Hello, I'm Carl Nassman. Welcome to the program. Another G7 nation has moved to recognize a Palestinian state. In just the last few hours, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said that his country would recognize Palestine in September if the governing body in the occupied West Bank meets certain conditions. Those conditions include holding an election and democratic reforms. It comes a day, of course, after British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced that the UK will recognize a Palestinian state in September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire in Gaza. France also announced a similar plan last week, but without conditions. Here's Mr. Carney now explaining his decision.
That Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine. Canada will always steadfastly support Israel's existence as an independent state in the Middle East, living in peace and security. Any path to lasting peace for Israel also requires a viable and stable Palestinian state, and one that recognizes Israel's inalienable right to security and peace.
Israel has rejected that decision, saying Canada's change in position is a reward for Hamas. U.S. President Donald Trump, of course, announced that Palestinian statehood would be rewarding the militant group Hamas. This as U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is traveling to Israel for talks on a Gaza ceasefire and the worsening humanitarian crisis. With aid agencies warning of famine-like conditions in Gaza, Palestinians also face continued airstrikes. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry has reported 104 people killed, nearly 400 people injured in just the past 24 hours. Hospitals told the BBC 6 people were killed near an aid distribution site in southern Gaza on Wednesday. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which runs that center, denied those reports. Meanwhile, 7 more Palestinians have reportedly died of hunger. Israel has responded to global pressure by allowing a limited number of aid trucks to enter Gaza. Sources told the BBC that 115 trucks entered the territory on Tuesday. That's well short of the 500 to 600 the United Nations says are needed. The BBC understands almost none of those trucks reached their destination. They were looted after they crossed the border. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has spoken to several world leaders in the past 24 hours about his proposal to recognize a Palestinian state. The Palestinian territories are Gaza, the Israeli-occupied West Bank, and occupied East Jerusalem. Israelis have built settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, which are home to hundreds of thousands of people. They are illegal under international law, although Israel disputes this. The occupied West Bank has seen increasing violence by settlers towards Palestinians. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, traveled to the village of Taibeh to ask people what they think of the UK's potential support for a Palestinian state.
This is a big part of the land Britain plans to recognize as a Palestinian state, the West Bank. It is often violent. Somewhere, most days, extremist Jews, here wearing masks, settled illegally on occupied land by Israel, threaten or attack their Palestinian neighbors. 2 nights ago, homes on the edge of the Palestinian village of Taibeh were the target of young Israeli men from a neighboring Jewish settlement. The wreckage was still there this morning. Kamal's car and house were attacked.
We were very, very scared. I have children and an old mom. Our lives were threatened and it was terrifying.
I don't know if you saw it on the news, but the British said yesterday that they would recognize a state of Palestine at the United Nations in September in New York. Do you think Britain's actions will make a difference?
I don't think so. It's a big step to have a superpower like Britain support us, but on the ground, it doesn't change much. Israel is not compliant to any international resolutions or laws. It doesn't listen to any other country in the whole world.
Taibeh is an entirely Christian village of around 1,500 people. It's quiet. After nearly 6 hard decades of Israeli occupation, more Taibeh people have been forced to emigrate than live in the village.
We will stay here forever. We will die here.
Father David Huri, the Greek Orthodox priest, is defiant. He was born here. They still worship in the remains of the 5th century church. Jewish settlers have harassed them here too, he said. The priests are trying to persuade young people to stay. Palestinian recognition by Britain, France, and others might help if it brings investment. In his own church, Father David told me how dangerous it feels when the settlers come into the village.
And did they have guns?
Yes, they have guns.
Do you think they might use the guns?
Of course they will, if we argue with them.
And did they threaten you?
Of course.
Threaten the farmers?
Yeah.
What did they say?
They said, this is the land, it belongs to us. You have nothing to do here. You have to leave.
And how long have Christians been in this village?
Christian, we are here since Jesus Christ. 2,000 years, our roots here. We can't move. We will not move. Even if we die here, we will not move from here. Palestine is inside our blood. How we can live without our blood?
It's not a gift. It's not a favor.
A few miles away in Ramallah, Hussam Zomlot, the top Palestinian diplomat in London, is home for the summer. I had to speak to him from Jerusalem as going through Israeli checkpoints takes so long. He is delighted with the Starmer plan.
It is a sign that the UK and with it the rest of the international community are really serious about the two-state solution. We are no longer in the business of the lip service that has lasted for 3 decades, actually. If you really seek two states, recognize the two states. And for the last 30 years, we have gotten to where we are today, an Israeli government that is after the erasure of the Palestinian people, finishing off what left of the Palestinian people and land is because of the lack of clarity and the lack of investment in a serious manner. So this is not symbolic. I repeat again, this is very actual, this is very real, this is very practical, and this is very democratic.
At Israel's parliament in Jerusalem, the ultra-nationalist MP Simcha Rothman echoed his prime minister, saying Keir Starmer was rewarding Hamas terrorism.
He is threatening the state of Israel with punishment and thinks that's the way to bring peace to the Middle East. He's not in a position to punish us, and it definitely will not bring peace, and it's against justice, history, religion, culture, and is giving a huge reward for Yahya Sinwar and for Hamas.
The former Hamas leader.
Former Hamas leader. Wherever he is in hell today, he sees what Keir Starmer says and say, good partner.
Building Jewish settlements on occupied land has been a huge national project for Israel since 1967. Some powerful government ministers here say the best response to international recognition of Palestinian independence is to annex all the occupied territory they want to keep, to end any hope of a viable Palestinian state. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Jerusalem.
I spoke a short while ago with Jane Harman. She's a former Democratic congresswoman from California. She was also the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee. I asked her for her reaction to Canada becoming the latest G7 nation, of course, after France and the UK, to move towards the recognition of a Palestinian state.
Well, it has long been U.S. policy until this administration to support a two-state solution. I certainly support it. Right this minute, it is not viable, but over time it certainly is viable, and it is the only path to protect Israel's security, let alone a homeland for 5 million Palestinians who live in Gaza and the West Bank. So in general, I support the idea. Every part of this story, however, is heartbreaking, especially that children are dying of starvation and that at least 20 hostages, or approximately 20 hostages who may still be alive, have not been returned after all this time. And there has to be a way through this. The two pieces that I think are going to change, given all this international pressure, are one, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is now in an untenable position. Reportedly, he's delayed all this so that the Knesset would go on a vacation so that they couldn't call for new elections. I think that there's going to be enormous pressure on him, given all this. So that's one piece. The other piece is President Trump is under huge pressure. And he saw the pictures of the starving children, and he realizes that what he was told was not correct. And I think it's in his interest, absolutely in his interest, to work with the entire neighborhood, including the Arab League, which unanimously just now said that condemned October 7th, 2023, said Israel was right to defend itself, but then went on to say they strongly support a two-state solution. This is new for them.
Yeah.
So the world is coalescing here, and I think we're going to have action in a better direction.
Yet in the meantime, we do know that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will be traveling to the Middle East on Thursday. How do you see the U.S. reacting now? You mentioned that President Trump is under some pressure. Do you think that, the administration will double down on its support for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, or will it use this moment potentially to begin to press harder?
Well, I'm hoping for the latter. I think there are increasing voices inside the United States for the latter, and I think Trump would be rewarded if he could find or help find a way forward with most of the folks who live in the neighborhood. Another piece that has to be mentioned, though, is not only do I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition is untenable, and I think he could, if he really wanted to stay in power longer, form a different coalition. But I also think that the governance of the Palestinian Authority is very weak. And the good news is Starmer and the others are saying whatever new government is formed, and they're talking about one entity, must not include Hamas in any position.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're live with BBC News. U.S. President Donald Trump made 3 major tariff announcements on Wednesday, this time on U.S. trade with India, Brazil, and South Korea. He took to Truth Social to announce what he called a full and complete trade deal with South Korea, which will have a 15% tariff rate in exchange for $350 billion in investments, quote, owned and operated by the United States. President Trump said that South Korea will also buy $100 billion of U.S. energy products, including liquefied natural gas. Now, earlier, President Trump announced he would impose a 25% tariff on goods from India beginning August 1st. Those tariffs against India are on the higher end of what Mr. Trump proposed on Tuesday when he said he was considering a rate between 20 and 25%. Indian trade representatives say that they're studying the implications of those tariffs and remain committed to fair negotiations. India bought about 1.7 million barrels per day of Russian oil between January and June. That's linked to another potential tariff if that country does continue to buy Russian products. President Trump also signed an executive order that places an additional 40% tariff on products from Brazil, bringing U.S. trade duties on that country to a total of 50%. He had earlier threatened Brazil with high tariff rates in response to what he called a witch hunt against former President Jair Bolsonaro. And earlier on Wednesday, U.S. officials announced that they would sanction a Supreme Court justice in Brazil who's leading an investigation into allegations that Mr. Bolsonaro plotted a coup after losing his bid for re-election in 2022. Our correspondent in Brazil is Ione Wells. She has more.
These tariffs that the US has implemented on Brazil are political rather than economic. That's what differentiates them from some other tariffs that have been implemented in other parts of the world. Donald Trump falsely claimed earlier in July that Brazil had a trade deficit. The US had a trade deficit with Brazil. In fact, the US runs a trade surplus with Brazil. It sells more to Brazil than it buys from Brazil. Donald Trump has blamed these tariffs on what he has described as a witch hunt against his ally, the right-wing former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. Jair Bolsonaro is currently facing a trial over allegations that he instigated a coup attempt after he lost the last election. His supporters stormed government buildings, vandalized government buildings after he lost that election, and these allegations also include a potential plot to kill the current president Lula da Silva. Now, Bolsonaro denies all these allegations, but for months and months, Jair Bolsonaro and his son Eduardo have been lobbying US officials, asking for the government there to intervene. And now Donald Trump has done that in a major way, implementing 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods. These tariffs will hit both Brazilian businesses hard, but also US consumers. Brazil produces a huge amount of coffee, orange juice, steel products, oil, products which the US buys a lot of. And this could well not only hit Brazilian businesses, but also push some prices up for US consumers. Bolsonaro is hoping that this will affect the outcome of his trial in some way, although Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, has repeatedly emphasized that he won't be intimidated by these threats of tariffs, that the judiciary is independent from politics in Brazil, and he has urged Donald Trump and the US government to come to the negotiating table to find a solution. At the moment, though, there is no sign of that happening, and at this time, President Lula and President Trump have not even exchanged a phone call.
Ione Wells there reporting. An investigative hearing is underway into a deadly mid-air collision over Washington, D.C. in January. The collision took place when an American Airlines flight from Wichita, Kansas, collided with a Black Hawk helicopter above Ronald Reagan National Airport. All 67 people aboard the two aircraft were killed in that crash. The National Transportation Safety Board opened 3 days of hearings on Wednesday. It plans to question witnesses and investigators about how the Federal Aviation Administration, as well as air traffic controllers, along with the U.S. Army, may have contributed to that crash. Let's take a look now at some other stories making headlines. Former U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris says she will not run for governor of California. For now, she says, my leadership in public service will not be in elected office. She added in a statement that she's looking forward to getting back out and listening to the American people and helping Democrats. Ms. Harris was, of course, unsuccessful in her bid for the U.S. presidency, losing to Donald Trump in November 2024. The High Court in the UK has ruled that the group Palestine Action is allowed to challenge the ban imposed on by the government. The Home Secretary banned the group after members caused an estimated £7 million worth of damage to jets at a Royal Air Force base and orchestrated break-ins at defense firms with links to Israel. Greece has taken the controversial step of detaining everyone who arrives on small boats from North Africa and denying them the right to apply for asylum. The new migration minister says the measure is justified for 3 months initially because the island of Crete has seen a sudden surge in arrivals, particularly from Libya, the height of the tourist season. Human rights lawyers criticize the move, and the European Commission says it's looking into it. So our correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports now.
To a certain extent, I can disagree with that.
They set out for Europe with hope, but in Crete, this is how all migrants and asylum seekers now end up. We saw them held in the sweltering heat and most basic conditions as Greece tries to deter others from following. It's the response to a sudden increase in small boats to the island from Libya. When hundreds of migrants scrambled ashore in 2 days, the government called it an invasion. Now, everyone is being detained here.
I'm not being allowed to talk to anyone here. I don't know exactly why they've come here, where they want to get to. But what I do know is that they can't get any further. The Greek authorities have suspended the right to apply for asylum. And all of these people here, all they know is that they now are facing being deported.
First, they'll be moved to this closed camp on the Greek mainland.
I didn't realise I fell asleep, so I
security fences,
as well.
there are both economic migrants and those from countries at war, like Sudan.
We are living with a prisoner. We couldn't go outside.
I managed to contact one man in